You can pick. Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Lisa Carey. So Lisa is the Associate Dean in Learning and Technology at the School of Education at Murdoch University. She has worked in educational contexts in Australia, Canada and the United States of America for over 30 years. Her experience and qualifications have led to the analysis of curriculum at the local, national and international level, and she has a strong international reputation as a curriculum scholar and educational researcher. In particular, her research approaches the study of curriculum from development to critical analysis. This move provides a significant contribution to the field of curriculum studies by deconstructing central notions of schooling and citizenship. This focus on revealing the way social constructions of worthwhile knowledge and good teaching are inextricably linked to issues of social justice and equitable access to learning opportunities. Lisa's work brings together theory and practice in educational research by making the ethical move towards the study of discourses that frame our knowledge and the way we know others as an ethical move towards social justice. So I'd like to invite Lisa to come up and thank you very much.
Thank you. I sound really exciting, don't I? After lunch on Friday, here we go. I might be white, but I'm not very nice. The reason this is being shown to you today, there is a reason. David's really worried, but there is a reason. I do a lot of deconstructive analysis of how Hollywood presents teachers. This is based on a movie called Freedom Writers. Has anyone seen Freedom Writers? OMG! So Freedom Writers is a wonderful story with Hilary Swank and McDreamy's in there. Patrick Dempsey's the husband that she leaves. What's that about? I'm sorry. But the most important thing is that in that movie, based on a true story, this teacher, Erin Gruelle, came across some students in Year 8 that she felt she had a really strong connection to, committed to them. So she went to the school board in her twin set and pearls and said, I would like to have these students throughout their high school English career. She managed to get that. She then, once they went on to university, got a job at the university they went to. People, that's called stalking. So the notion of a good teacher and Hollywood's notion of a good teacher builds on all sorts of populist understandings of what a teacher is. And we know that it's a highly feminised profession historically, if we think of Little House on the Prairie. And in Western Australia, we need to think about the fact that we, of course, were very special with our convicts, and we asked for convicts who were educated and could read and write. And in Western Australia, many of the convicts became the first teachers. But here's the problem. The authorities couldn't trust these convict teachers. And there's a lot of lack of trust in the discourses about teaching as well, and supervision required. So teachers are very, very middle class. And we have not really been trusted in many cases, with the authorities being more in the upper middle class section of society historically. So there's lots of supervision. There's also lots of work happening at the moment in the teacher ed space around making sure that the teacher ed students can pass tests, certain tests, and you know this whole test regime of testing that is going on from kindergarten through to graduating with their teacher education courses. I have been around in a nice way. Any excuse to show such a picture. I use this slide when I am giving keynotes in the US, especially internationally, and they love Australia overseas, and I've done my best to represent as well, but there have been moments. So when I had, there were very many times when people put away the silver because I was Australian. Could be convict background. I said, oh, don't be silly, all Western Australian convicts were educated. Until I came back 6 years ago and found that there was a convict in the family. But that's not, no worries. So, I was once quite normal. I taught in a high school in Carey. I know, I love Carey, I don't care what anyone says. And then I've gone on, went off overseas to Saskatchewan, Canada, to do my masters. As I was flying into Saskatchewan's capital, I was praying that it was pronounced Regina. It was not. So then I went and did my doctorate in the US and ended up as an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, where the Dixie Chicks and Willie Nelson lived, so that was cool. I've come back. I love this slide. I especially like the Goodwill Hunting slide. We always know if Robin Williams had a beard that it was a serious role. And of course we love him on many different levels. The what I really do, I remember when I was normal and a teacher and had this many English essays on my desk to mark. The point of this slide, of course, is we are often judged by what others think we do. In that video, there was a lovely point where there was the fellow in the jacket with elbow patches drinking, saying these are minorities, they can't do anything. Are there any maths teachers in the room? Oh, okay. Sorry, sir. I always like to pretend that that's a maths teacher. But the truth is that that attitude is in lots of different subjects. But I do think if you teach English, or you're teaching language, or you're in the area of the social sciences especially, you have a lot more space to talk about the construction of culture. And I have no doubt that as we go on, the issues of citizenship are closely aligned to the issues of the good teacher. We have a responsibility. We need to situate citizenship in our classrooms. So there are so many things happening right now. For the first time at the Olympics, and it's interesting that I feel trapped here with this microphone. I can't move around and dance because I'm being videoed. But anyway, good teaching, what is that? So for the first time at the Olympics, we had a refugee team. Not long ago, there was a protest in Melbourne. I think the Melbourneites are very special people. They protested because the Australian government wanted to start checking people's visas in the street. And there was a large protest against that. I have gone through a number of citizenship experiences myself that I include in my writing, one that's forthcoming. But basically, I did become a citizen in the US because I thought I was going to be staying there for a long time. I renounced my citizenship from the US when I returned to Australia because I had to return to Australia, not only because I'm getting old, but because I was unwell in the US and I couldn't afford, even on the top salary and the best insurance, to be unwell in the US. And I had the privilege of being a citizen of Australia. So a lot of the citizenship discourses are about privilege, but I'll never forget being at the consulate here in Perth and raising my hand at the window of the US consulate and saying, I, Lisa Jane Carey, renounce my US citizenship. And the people behind me are all there begging to get in. So citizenship, there are things that we need to think about in there, and that one of the major things I am concerned about is privilege. Whose citizenship is privileged? And my accent was privileged when I worked overseas. They often said, oh, you sound almost British, so we'll give you the job. I said, thank you so much, as my post-colonial theoretical insides shake. But the work of Sonia Nieto is really important. A lot of the stuff I talk about school level, but I really think any classroom space. We need to work on, with our students, on organising critical and creative thinking. The Melbourne Declaration of 2008 stated that civics and citizenship needed to be central to the curriculum. So a very thin curriculum was developed. Was anyone in the room involved in that? So, it was developed. There was no room in the school curriculum for it to be offered. And this is what happens quite often with these top-down reforms. Things have changed. Now, this is obviously something that I presented to school districts. I get calls as the Associate Dean at Murdoch from parents. And I say, thank you so much for calling. However, I can't talk about your child's records or situation with you. I just need to talk with your child. And if they come along to a meeting, I say, thank you so much for coming to this meeting, and I talk to their child. Do you have any parents getting in touch? No, yes you do, okay. So this is a very, very interesting change, and a lot of it's about who's responsible. Who's responsible? So the issue is that it's as if the students are no longer responsible. I've got someone who's lost control. Are you okay?
I was just thinking about Australian husbands.
Okay, we're not going on to the Australian husband. This is being recorded. I am single and looking, but that is not important. See you Friday afternoon. I'm doing my job? Okay. The thing about teachers' work, we are constrained and we are known. It's an epistemological issue. So how people know us is through these social, cultural and historical discourses and what they expect from us. Now, many of you may have been at barbecues or dinner parties, and when someone asks you, what do you do? I often come up with something other than teacher. I also come up with something other than curriculum as my area, because people think that means a lesson plan, when it's actually the philosophical and sociological foundations of knowledge. So, I did go on a blind date once, it's in the next book. He asked me what I did after 2 or 3 hours where I wanted to jump out of the car. It was a long road trip. And it was a Renaissance festival. It was bad. But the main point is, after I talked about my research and citizenship and good teaching and everything else, and an associate professor at the University of Texas, he said, so you're just a teacher. It was never going to work. But what we have here are the complications that we work with as teachers in any educational space. So there are all sorts of things that are at play. I don't need to say anything, do I? So my work, my book in 2006, not required reading, possibly bedside reading if you're an insomniac. I once joked about this to a class keynote somewhere else in another country, in America, not great senses of humour, and the student said, I wish you'd stop trying to force me to buy a book. I said, really? It's on Amazon.com, but the most important part of this is that a discourse authorises some people to speak and silences others. So there's something about being a teacher where everyone believes they have a right to speak because they were once a student. So everyone thinks they know what teachers are. They don't assume that with medical professionals or other high-level professionals, but if you've got teacher anywhere in your work, as a part of your work, they look down. So we need to interrogate these uninterrogated, normalising practices. And you are all experts, you know with your students as well, that if we don't reveal what's happening to your students, to your own career, that we are in danger of just being normalised. And our students especially face that challenge, especially if they come, and I think a lot of your students do, from other nations, other cultures, as in not the dominant culture. These discourses govern how we know, and the phrase that I use all the time is how we know what we know. And that's an epistemological question. Ontologically, you'll be talking about what is, but epistemologically, we're talking about how we know what we know. So, who gets to tell us what we should be doing? There's lots and lots of things here. But tell me, who tells you as language and English teachers in this tertiary sector, who tells you what to teach? Any ideas? The politicians, certainly. We are political animals in a political institution. Education is not neutral. It is a political institution.
Students sometimes.
Okay, so that's wonderful if you listen to your students. I do sometimes worry about the student voice though, not so much that it's not heard, but at the university, as I'm being recorded, there's a lot of pressure to keep what they call bums on seats. And there's a lot of pressure to be work ready and to focus on work ready. And I think we are always in danger of forgetting that we are an Enlightenment institution at this sector and that we have a moral and ethical responsibility. So everyone's been a teacher. Dan Lorty wrote this a long time ago. I am always against the idea that your references have to be recent. They don't all have to be recent. This is a very important piece. I don't call it seminal for obvious reasons. You're English teachers, think about it. Ovarian. It's an ovarian term. And the idea is that everyone's had thousands of hours of experience being a student. So they think they know what teaching is. And you get that all the time. I do a lot of work from a post-colonial perspective because I'm looking for these in-between spaces. But for example, we can interrupt terra nullius if we're thinking of citizenship, terra nullius being the European position that there was nothing here when the Europeans arrived. Now we know that's not true, but we have to be very careful on the discourses of how we talk. And in the bio, the second half of the bio statement talks about the fact that I talk about others with a capital O. My book editor was very annoyed. What is this capital O? Well, the capital O other is the fact that there's an us and them discourse. And we hear that a lot. We hear it really in a very troubling way when it comes to refugees and asylum seekers at the moment. I gave a talk on good citizenship at the Social Education Australia conference a few years ago. And at that time I thought I'd go on Facebook and look for citizenship in the title. Well, there was a Facebook page. We grew here, you flew here, so F off. This is on Facebook. We see it on the stickers on cars. We're full, sorry, go home. These discourses are very, very strong and very divisive. But let's think about America, because they're much worse off than we are. I often say the reason America's problems seem bigger is literally because of population. We have the same hateful discourses, they're just not as many people. I'm not in any way saying we don't have issues. So when I was teaching in America, I had a student who came up to me, bless her little heart, undergraduate student. Dr. Carey, oh my God, do you have Thanksgiving in Australia? I said, no, we talk about the genocide in other ways. Actually, she didn't get it. This has been recording. I've never told that joke with recording, so I'll just move on. So when I taught in America, I often used a film called Barbecue Area, and I used to show a rabbit-proof fence, because it was easier for them to think about social construction of difference if it wasn't in their backyard. And so I often use other examples when I'm here teaching about the same sorts of things, because it is very confronting. So I've gone from over the years from saying we're all racist, let's start there, which doesn't work very well, to let's talk about the social construction of difference and how we're all involved. There are binaries. Any of you who have a Derridian theoretical background will know about this. So there's the good and the bad citizen. But interestingly enough, because I was born here, I'm not as frightened of the government as I was when I was an immigrant in America, and I had every privilege there, being white and English speaking, and a professor. So there's good and bad citizens. There's Australian and un-Australian. There are deviant subjectivities. One of the pieces I've written about is about how in the US, in the early to mid-1900s, young women who were seen as deviant, hypersexualised, or talking to sailors, or in some other way problematised, including being raped, and it's a bit like the Magdalen laundries, they were sent to the juvenile justice system. And once they got to the juvenile justice system, this is all about citizenship at every level, because once they went into the juvie system, they were separated by virgins and non-virgins. This was the time of the social hygienists, the eugenics movement. So there were obviously moves to sterilise those who were very bad and out of control. And it was a very troubled time. And this is in the US, it happened in Canada, it happened here. So you will hear eugenics hints, discourses about who's worth having and who's not. I don't know about your staff rooms, but in school staff rooms, you'll hear such things as, well, it's no wonder that child's like that. Have you seen the parents? That's actually a hint of this discourse, that there are some people who should be reproducing and some who shouldn't. So we need to interrupt these discourses about the children, about the teachers, and about the citizens. We need to create a space of knowing where we can know ourselves and others. And we need to complicate our assumptions about teaching, citizenship, and our students. I'm a recovering Catholic, and that looks like a Catholic uniform to me. And I'm single. I'm sorry, I'm just remembering back to the husbands thing. There's probably a reason for that. The good student. The good student is so easy to think about. It's a bit like saying, what does a teacher look like? And you could probably immediately draw a picture of what a teacher might look like, especially if you think early childhood, female, primary, possibly female, maybe male, secondary, mainly male. It's not the way it works out now, but historically. University, there was something on Facebook just the other day, male professors are seen as geniuses and female professors are seen as annoying. I'm sure it wasn't about me. But the good student, when I taught high school for many years, was about the ones that didn't smell. I have a very developed sense of smell. But good hygiene, the right accent, the right language, the right behaviour. It's called it's all social capital. So if you think of Bourdieu's work, it's all about, do they have the right culture? And I know that you're committed to addressing this in your own classes because you have chosen this profession, because you know that it's much more than that. And what you want to do is make it clear to everyone how power plays out, therefore how to be successful. So it's actually a real twist. At high school, this was very clear. I doubt in the tertiary sector, when we have students who are paying and when we have a sort of a client discourse going on in tertiary sector, that this is as much of an issue. But it's how we see the students, not how they behave. So this is cultural or social capital. And basically we reward those who are like us. And that's just something to keep in mind. I'm pretty sure the fellow with the white hair is Newt Gingrich. Let's think of Trump. We can always talk about Trump, can't we? Not to be sued, thank you, Mr. Trump. But if you look at the desks in this cartoon, that's what really made me use it. And if we go back to freedom writers and the Hollywood representation of teachers, you clearly need to work 2 jobs, my own money for supplies on the desk, and you probably would be best to have some sort of military or police training. Arnold Schwarzenegger, kindergarten cop. Michelle Pfeiffer, the substitute. Military background helps. But what is happening in this cartoon is that the students are being judged and they're being framed by these discourses of their background. And I'm not in any way claiming innocence, because we are, as Foucault would say, we are in it. We are not separate. We are in it, therefore we have to work against it. We reproduce this stuff all the time without even realising it. So we have to keep working on it. So it's very complicated. So we want to prepare young people for multiple and evolving citizenship at different levels and in different spaces. In this instance, Mallow, Kennedy and Greenwood suggest the following as identifying elements of citizenship. It's a big job. I have no doubt it's built into your curriculum, but what often happens when you have a cross-curriculum or an embedded idea is it can get lost. So we need to bring it back to the front. We are living in a digital age. I mean, the American presidential election seems to be playing out at the level of Twitter in a very disturbing way. So we need to revisit what citizenship might mean, because our students are living in this digital age, and so are we, but they certainly more than us. And local and national communities, and the local community could be a Twitter sphere. I only once tried to go on Twitter because I wanted to follow Stephen Fry, but my phone couldn't cope. But anyway, look. Yeah, I just gave up. But if I was cool and down with the kids, I like to get down with the kids. If I was cool, I'd be on Twitter, but I'm not, obviously. You've heard already. So what we need to do, though, is we need to use it rather than ignore it. And we need to connect with the global issues that we just saw when it comes to this digital age and in our classrooms. So no, it's not about closing the door and shutting everything out now. There was a time when it was. But it is about, within your classroom, making a difference. So first of all, we need to centre students in the epistemological space, that space of knowing. And the best way to do that is to rethink where they sit in the classroom, as in the knowledge production cycle. Now, I've already got an idea that you listen to your students, and I really think that there's a commitment to social justice and change from what I've already gathered today and from what you do for a living. But we need to rethink how they are in the classroom, and we need to create these active global citizens. How do we know what we know? One way of doing this, and it's very difficult actually because it's vulnerable, and that is a sharing of personal stories. I have no doubt you have various activities where you ask for autobiographical stories or critical incident writing. You do that sort of thing. It's actually quite vulnerable for the student, isn't it? Now, I've done this at undergrad and doctoral level, but when I'm with the graduate students who are teachers themselves, I'm always very careful. If you are going to do this in the high school space, for example, You need to set it up so that everyone's safe. Because people do share amazing, they're very courageous, the things they share. So it's not an easy thing, it's not just, and how do you mark someone's life? Well, interesting, but you didn't speak loud enough, so your life, I think I'll give you a D, or a fail, you know. So we need to be very careful how we do this. It's just easy for me to say, and I know you do it already, but it's very important to think about how that works. And it's not just about the presentation. You're all very, very good students, by the way, because you're all at least pretending to listen. But when you have students in your classroom and other people are giving their life stories or their autobiographies, having the audience listening is as important as anything else. Is that difficult? Yeah. So building the respect for each other and building so that it's not just about when it's your turn. It's about being involved and listening and being, really respectful is really important. The most important part, of course, is there's no Q&A here. Why did you... No questions about people's lives. Thank you very much. Next. Our positionality, of course, has to be evaluated as well, and we have to reflect. If you're anything like me, there are times when you go home and go, oh, shouldn't have said that. The most important part of this, though, is reflecting as a teacher. Now, I'm lucky because my career is all about reflecting on what's happened. And I'll share a story with you. It's coming up. In this situation, I'm Zena. Of course. It's obvious, isn't it? The situation is, I'm at the University of Texas, 65,000 students. I'm an associate professor, I have an accent, whatever. So the students were doing group presentations on various theories, educational theories. They got up to give a presentation on critical theory using the work of Michael Apple. They did an okay job, they talked a bit. Well, I felt I needed to add more. So I jumped up and I gave an off-the-cuff 15-minute impassioned discussion about critical theory and why we needed to believe in it. That's the last part's the problem. There was a student there, a doctoral student, think of Texas, think of nice white lady, sitting there with a fluffy pen, a bit like Al Woods in Legally Blonde. A fluffy pen in my very serious class. And I said, okay, so thanks very much, how do you feel about that? And she said, oh my God, so sick of hearing about social justice and critical thinking and critical theory, and I just want to teach all children. So, I went home that night feeling I hadn't been a good teacher. Not because she hadn't agreed with me, but because I obviously hadn't done it right. And that ended up being a piece that I called strategic confrontation. Because if you're going to be talking about difficult knowledge, you need to really be aware of how you do it. So I went back the next week, I handed out a survey, please tell me how you felt during that experience. Did it work for you, didn't it work for you, what could we do, what could I do better? And they all came back, 99.9%. That was amazing, that's why we chose this university, so, experts could talk about this sort of stuff. And one in green pen that said, yeah, well, I hear it in every unit, I'm sort of sick of it. So we need to be very aware of how we're teaching, and we need to reflect on it all the time. We need to understand the influence and role of the media in our students' lives. The conditions of knowledge production, because curriculum is knowledge production. What we do is involved in knowledge production, and the distribution are changing all the time. The internet can be useful, but we certainly need to teach critical analysis of these digital technologies. Because what we have are groups of netizens. Love that phrase. Because a lot of the real life is being played out through these digital lenses. I mean, if I see one more selfie, of course, Facebook's for old people, I know that now. But all these selfies, all these pictures of food, really? Do I care? Narcissism is on the rise. You know the selfie stick? The wand of narcissism. I didn't come up with that, but here's all the good stuff. A few more minutes, David? So, have I kept you awake? Doesn't matter if there's no substance, let's just keep going. So, we're all being bombarded all of the time, and so are our students. There are all sorts of various influences going on in their lives, and we need to analyse them. We need to bring into the classroom things that are happening in the news, and we need to talk about what it means. So the fact that there was a refugee team, the fact that there were trans athletes who were running but had to be through a process known as trans, and they were choosing, not choosing is the right word, they were running in their assigned and what they believe their life's gender is. So when we had the Olympics in the, when was Maria Patino's case? 50s. She's a Spanish runner who ran and won medals at the Olympics, and then that was at the time when they changed from just a visual observation, just for the women you can imagine, of gender, like a physical exam, to genetic testing, and they found that she had XXY, that she had an intersexed condition, and they took her medals away from her. Interestingly enough, she fought back, and she got the medals back after she did the ultimate gendered act. She had a baby. So they gave the medals back. But this terrain is shifting all the time, and citizenship's not just about nationality, it's about so much more. So we need to discuss the social participation and the responsibility. So it's fine to deconstruct what is a citizen on all levels, but there's a responsibility, and I think in the generations to come, it's responsibility we really have to work with to highlight. So here's a piece from the book on Amazon.com. We need to be aware at all times that when we are in crises, and I call them manufactured crises, especially when it's about funding, with my friend I met, and money, as we all are, that it ends up being a very technical, rationalist discussion. It's just about the bums on seats. But it's so much more than that, and so much more complicated. And I really enjoyed coming to speak to you today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time. Thanks a lot.